Hey everybody, my name is Grimace, you're watching The Bespoke Woodsman. On this channel I talk about hiking, backpacking gear. If those kinds of things interest you, click subscribe, click the notification bell. Would love to have you along with me. This week I wanted to talk about something that seems to cause a lot of anxiety, and that's ultralight versus traditional backpacking. What I mean by it causes a lot of anxiety is I see a lot of videos on YouTube from backpackers talking about why I'm not ultralight, sort of making apologies for gear not being ultralight. Oh, I know it's not ultralight, but... And I want to just sort of dispel some myths and maybe just talk sort of about what ultralight is and what it is not. So if you haven't heard of ultralight backpacking, it is exactly what it sounds like. It's an effort to reduce weight to the bare minimum. This came about largely from thru hikers, people who would hike the Appalachian Trail or the Continental Divide Trail or the Pacific Crest Trail, these multi-month hikes where you're carrying everything for, 3,000 miles, 2,000 miles. And you want to reduce weight as much as possible, but it applies to regular everyday backpacking as well. Ultralight is traditionally thought of as being a base weight of 10 pounds or less. That isn't necessarily what ultralight means. What ultralight really means is it's a mindset of choosing gear, choosing what you will bring, choosing what you will purchase, with an idea toward eliminating waste, eliminating redundancies in your gear. It does also mean sometimes getting lightweight materials as opposed to, your old clunky tent that you car camped with when you were 13 years old. But for the most part, it really is a mindset. So why would a person want to drop weight? Well, as I mentioned before, if you're walking thousands of miles, certainly your body's going to take a toll and you want to eliminate that toll. But that's true anyway. So, one of the things that it does, when I first backpacked, I would carry 45, 50 pounds and I was miserable the whole time. I could hike maybe 6 miles would be a big day for me. I remember I had an 11-mile day and I honestly did not know how I was going to handle it. And I made it through, but I was just absolutely miserable the next day. But with ultralight, the more you can drop the weight, the faster that you can go, the farther you can go. So if you're the kind of a person who wants to put in a bunch of miles and then camp because, you have to sleep before the next day, you put in more miles, then ultralight is probably for you. If you're the kind of a person who wants to get to camp relatively quickly and just set up and cook and have a good time and sit out on the chair, listen, that's okay too. That is a style of backpacking. It is I'm not much of a camper. I like the hiking part, but maybe you are, and that's okay. Hike your own hike. No one's mad at you, I don't think. Maybe there are ultralight people who are like really angsty, but I haven't seen that. What I've seen is a lot of people defending themselves against not being ultralight. And that's fine. I'm not ultralight. Base weight wise, I carry an 11 to 12 pound pack. I can't see myself reducing it much farther than where it already is. I'm not actually super interested in that. Like, I feel like my weight is right where I need it to be. But I'm ultralight in the sense that if I see a piece of gear that is redundant and I can figure out how to eliminate that, then I do. So, how can we do that? Well, here are some helpful tips, I think. Things that helped me anyway when I was reducing my weight from 50 pounds to 11 pounds. The first thing I recommend, track what you use. Everything you take with you. Write it down, make a gear list, write down what you took, and really track whether or not you used that item. If you go 3 or 4 trips where you don't use a certain piece of gear, maybe you don't need that piece of gear. With the exception of emergency items. If a first aid kit, for instance, hopefully you never have to use it, but you want to have it there because it can mean life or death. Although you should start to think about what to eliminate in the first aid kit, but let's not even get there yet. So track what you're using and start to take things out and see if you even miss them. The second thing I recommend is knowledge weighs nothing. Backcountry navigation, for instance, knowing campsite selection, knowing how to cook with very minimal materials, knowing how to cold soak, those sorts of things, knowing how to pitch a tarp, those sorts of things weigh nothing and you should always be learning. I think having those skills, having that knowledge is really the most sort of ultralight thing you can do, because you're already carrying what's between your ears, so you might as well make use of it. The number 3 thing is, if you shave grams, the ounces will follow, and if you shave ounces, the pounds will follow. You might be amazed just how much weight you can lose by clipping tags off of your packed clothing. Taking things out of stuff sacks that don't need to be, combining things, putting all of your cook kit items together in one, in your pot, for instance. Those sorts of things, just sort of rethinking how everything is packaged, will help a lot. Eventually, you will find that you've shaved, 1.5 pounds, for instance. If you can shave 1 ounce off of 16 items, you've saved yourself a pound. So those sorts of things can be really useful. I think people get silly sometimes, but everyone likes to make fun of the cutting the toothbrush, but you can save some grams, and if you don't need the full toothbrush, cut it, drill some holes in it, whatever. Those sorts of things, like I said, it can get a little laughable at times, but also it can be super useful. The number 4 tip is lose superfluous items. If you have one piece of gear that can do 2 jobs, why not take that instead of 2 different pieces of gear? For instance, some people like to have a poncho that is also a tarp, that they also use as a tarp, or a piece of Tyvek that serves multiple purposes. I have a sit pad, for instance, that I use for all kinds of stuff. I use it as a frame for my frameless backpack. I use it as a doormat. I use it as a wind screen for my stove. I use it for everything, and it weighs like 1 ounce. So rather than bring all these other things along, I've now got this sit pad that I can use for all of these things. So even if something weighs a little bit more, if it accomplishes 2 things or 3 things or 4 things, then it can still save you weight by getting rid of the things you don't need. And in that mind, I would say, cut out redundancies. With the exception of filtering water, I always think personally that it's good to have a backup for water filtration and navigation for some people. I'm generally on well-established trails, and that's a tip too, is pay attention to where you're going, what you're doing. You may not need certain items for your kind of backpacking. That's something only you can know. Number 5 tip is improving your gear, and I would start specifically on your shelter and your sleep system. And the reason I say that is because you can save a lot of weight by upgrading those 2 items. Your pack is the 3rd item, but I don't even want to get into that yet. I don't want to get into frameless packs. I don't want to overwhelm you. I just think if you can upgrade your shelter, which is probably your tent, for most campers, maybe you're in a hammock, maybe you do a tarp and bivvy, in which case you're probably already ultralight, because, that's pretty extreme. I can't even do a tarp and bivvy. I like to have an enclosed space. But improve your shelter. Start looking at single wall tents, maybe. Start looking at just shaving weight there and in your sleep system, because you can lose a lot of weight very fast. If you're starting to get into upgrades, I just think those are like the bang for the buck kinds of places to look. The number 6 tip is really start to look at your clothing systems. First of all, you don't need to bring a change of underwear for every day. You don't really need to bring a change of clothes for every day. You're going to stink anyway. Just embrace it. Just lean into it. I like to have the set of clothes I'm hiking in. I like to have a mid layer and an insulating layer. I like to have a shell, sometimes rain pants if I need them, and then something to sleep in. That's kind of it. That's kind of all you need. You don't need a lot of clothing out on the trail with you. I think that's an easy place to lose weight also, is just start to look at your systems and think about how pieces of clothing fit together. I'm going to see if I can find a video of Andrew Skirka's 13 it's 13 articles of clothing. It's a system. Basically, you break your clothing down to 13 articles, and that should be theoretically all you ever need. I'm gonna see if I can find a video about it. If not, I'll make a video about it, and I may do that anyway. It's something that I've been sort of obsessing over the last 6 months, is like really rethinking how all of my clothes fit together. But that's a super great way to lose weight also, even beyond the upgrading of the materials, right? Even, I'm not going to say go get a new fleece, go get a new down puffy. You can, but just rethinking what you need to take, you know, if you've got something that can work with something else, I think that's a better way to shave weight at first. So the number 7 tip is actually just sort of a summation of what we already talked about, right? Rethink, repackage, replace in that order. I think if you can rethink, do I need this? Is this something that's useful to me? Do I ever actually use this? Is there a better way to accomplish this? Can I learn a skill that will prevent this from being necessary? That's rethinking. Number 2 is repackage. So whether that's cutting labels, whether that's putting things in a stuff sack or taking them out of a stuff sack, whether that's upgrading your pack, I guess would technically be repackaging. But just really thinking about how things are carried, what is carried, those sorts of things, and then replace. That's this upgrade of materials, upgrade of systems that you will go through over time. But again, I think a lot of people think about Ultralight and they think about spending thousands of dollars. You just don't have to. You can go down that rabbit hole. You can spin and spiral for a very long time chasing the perfect systems, and every time a new piece of gear comes out, you can jump at it. I'm guilty of that sometimes. I really like researching gear. I really like spreadsheets. I think the best example is I knew coming out of 2019 into 2020 I wanted to get a single wall tent. So I spent the last 4 months making this very complex spreadsheet, thinking about what I want in a tent. And I know for me, I like to have a lot of living area, but I don't want a lot of weight. So I was really like looking at volume versus weight. I had this spreadsheet that was really tracking and like, what do I want? How do I need? What do blah, blah, blah. And I finally got it down to 2. And I was watching the Black Friday sales, I was watching the Christmas sales, and neither one went on sale. So I just went all in. I bought the first one, my number one choice, and it finally arrived. It's a Tarp Tent Pro Trail. I'm really excited. Actually, I haven't even gotten a chance to set it up yet, but I'm really excited. And then right before I left town, my number 2 choice went on sale, like a pretty big sale. So I ended up getting that also, and that's the Dan Durston X-Mid one-person tent, which is also a trekking pole single wall tent. So I've got now 2 tents that I haven't even set up yet, so that'll probably be a video by itself. My point in saying that is you can spend a lot of time researching gear, looking at gear. I've got a long list of things that I'm either want to investigate more or potentially buy, but you don't have to. I didn't put a lot of, I probably dropped, of the 30 or so pounds that I dropped, I would say 20 to 25 of it was just eliminating stuff I didn't need, combining things without sacrificing anything, without sacrificing any money, without sacrificing any comfort, anything at all, really. So it's relatively easy to drop at least 10, 15, 20 pounds if you're sort of a traditional backpacker in that way. And I think the other important thing is, like, if you want the thing, take the thing. If you want to take a backpacking chair, by all means take a backpacking chair. Where I go, almost everywhere has a picnic table anyway. And I don't backpack with other people traditionally, so what would I sit out and do even? So kind of a sad story now. Anyway, so I hope that was helpful. I hope that will help people get rid of a little bit of anxiety they may have about having a pack that's a little too heavy. I don't know who they think it's too heavy for, since they're the ones who have to carry it. But if you want to reduce weight, I think this will help. And I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any comments, any questions, please leave them in the comments below. I'm happy to read them, happy to help wherever I can. And hey, let's do this again sometime.